Hi, my friend, and welcome to the Good Girl Syndrome show. This is the 11th episode. So we've already done 10, which is crazy to me. I think I just started a month ago, so it's pretty crazy to me. I'm so happy to see you again. If you do not know me, my name is Julie Vander Meulen, or Julie Vander Meulen, depending on where you are in the world. And I'm an empowerment coach for high achieving women. And on top of that, I've developed a concept called Good Girl Syndrome, which is what this show is all about. And so every single week, I choose one topic that relates somehow to Good Girl Syndrome and how good girls act in general. And I unpack it through two episodes a week. One on Wednesday, where I respond to one of your real life questions or situations, something that you need help with, and you contacted me. And then every Sunday, I create an episode where I talk about that same topic, but just how I deal with it, like where I come from on that specific topic and where I am today and what are the tools that I've used. So you get this type of dual lens. Um, Today we have a really cool topic because it's the new year. I'm recording this, so I'm making an exception this week. I'm recording both episodes on Sunday, so it's the 4th of January. Happy New Year, because I haven't seen you yet. I wish you all the best for this beautiful new year. Truly all the best in every area of your life. May you be happy, may you be loved, may you be blessed, whatever your heart desires, and so much more. And with the new year, good girls and other people, right? Everyone has a lot of questions about goals and intentions for the new year, right? We used to call them resolutions. And so this week we have Martine, who asked me a question on basically how to set goals without putting too much pressure on herself. So that's what we're going to talk about today. However, before we do, because I always forget and I'm trying to be better at this, my friend, if you are enjoying this content, please put a little like so that I see that, you're encouraging me and you're enjoying these. Or comment, tell me where you're from, who you are, how you're doing, are you enjoying the content, whatever you want to say, just put it in the comments below. If you haven't yet subscribed, right, you arrived here and you haven't yet subscribed, please subscribe to the channel. And if you have a question for me, right, if you want me to answer one of your questions, please feel free to go in the Google form. It's in the description box. You'll see a link to the Google form, and you can ask me your question. You can tell me about your story, and I'll unpack it here in the Good Girl Syndrome show. And if you sorry, if you have a question, but you've been a little shy just because you don't want me to mention your name and you don't want to be seen in that way because you're talking about vulnerable things, I completely understand. You can just say that you want to remain anonymous and I'll just, I won't share your name. That's it. Um, with that said, I think we should start. So let's read, as every week I take a little segment of what someone has said. And then I unpack it with you here live, right? I don't prepare it in advance. I just write the things down and then I see what comes to me, just as if this was a real life coaching session slash mentoring session with me. So here we go. Martine explained to me her situation, and I took this little, piece of content here. Thank you, by the way, Martine, for sending me your question and for being vulnerable with me, but also therefore with my community. So here's what she says. Every new year, I make goals and fail. I start strong and then break promises to myself. I'm tired of failing. How do I set intentions or goals in a way that feels good? I love this last question, by the way. How do I set intentions or goals in a way that feels good? You're on the right track. I'm just gonna say this just by your last question. I can tell you're on the right track. But I'm still gonna unpack everything else that you've said, just because it's gonna be useful for you, right, to dive deeper into what's going on with you, but also to anyone else who might be listening or watching this. So let's start with the first thing. Every new year, I make goals and fail. So you're a goals person, right? So that's what it tells me, first of all, goal oriented. So you make goals and then you fail. What I would ask in a coaching session is I would ask for some clarification on what that means, in the sense that failing is a very emotional, like it's like it's something that can mean something um very destructive for us. So to me, if I fail, it's something that I really, really want to avoid. If I say the word fail, it means I'm being very critical of myself. Um, and I'm seeing, a shortcoming or something that happened that I did not like, and I'm seeing it through a very critical lens. Oftentimes, what that means then is that I'm not being very objective, right? It's like I'm seeing this through a specific lens, and someone else who's around me would not be seeing the same thing, right? So here, my question is, what do you mean you fail? So you set goals and you fail. I'm going to take two examples of what that could mean because I don't have the context, the broader context of, what that means here. Um, do you fail because you just set those goals? You do the New Year's resolutions thing, right? It's how I grew up when I was little. Every year I would make, resolutions. Oh, I'm never again gonna eat potato chips, That's my big thing. I love potato chips. And then, I wouldn't eat them for the first day, and then the second day I would already be eating them. And then, I'd forget that I've even set those resolutions, right? Did you do something like that, right? I gave a silly example, but you see where I'm going with this. Did you just set goals and then didn't do anything about it? And so you feel like a failure because basically you've procrastinated or you've avoided, the things you wanted to do, you originally wanted to do. You're not doing them because you've been avoiding them. You haven't taken any action. Is that the scenario? Um, if that's the scenario, then the first thing to see is like, why? You know, why did you set those goals if you weren't gonna act on them, right? Probably because you desire them on some level, right? There's a lot of unpacking there. Whose goals are there? Are these yours, the ones you truly want? Are these yours, but based on what you think you should be doing? Or are these goals that have been imposed on you, consciously, unconsciously, by the people around you, by your society, by your culture, different things like that? Are these goals that you actually have control over? A lot of us will say something like, I'll take an example. For example, you could say, I want to be pregnant by the end of this year, right? Some of it is in your control, but a lot of it isn't, right? So are there some things that you're blaming yourself for, but it's actually not your fault, right? Or is it that, like these goals, that you set, you actually didn't take any actions towards it just because you were avoiding it. And you were, I don't know, a version of you were afraid of taking the action. You were being a perfectionist, right? You wanted everything to be right before you started because you had a lot of self-doubt, because you didn't make a real decision. You were hesitating between different things. It could be a number of things, right? So clarify for yourself if you're in that first scenario, what is it about it? Because I think once you understand what's behind it, you will be able to solve it, to make a decision on what you want for the new year. And perhaps that could be one of your new goals, right? To like stick to your own goals, right? Or like make better goals that you can actually achieve or you actually want to achieve, or, you know, something like that. The other thing that could mean, the failure, and I'm going to suspect that most probably you're in the second scenario, also based on the things that you said afterwards. Is it that you feel like you're failing? Like you set some really big goals and you feel like you're failing just because you've given your best effort. I'm not saying you could have done better. I'm not saying you could have done it right, but you've given it really your best effort for this year. Like when you look back, you're like, I really worked on those things, and yet I failed at it because my goal was too big, right? It was not possible for me to achieve it in the specific circumstances that I was in. Is that the scenario that we're in? Because then, if that is the case, like if you can honestly look at yourself and feel proud of all the actions that you have taken, right? And then when you look at it objectively, you think, actually, I think I was a little too hard on myself at the beginning of the year with all the things that I wanted to do, right? Like it's not human to be able to do all of these things. And or like I'm starting this new venture, I'm starting this new, if you're setting a goal, usually it means that you want something that you do not currently have. Doesn't have to be something material. It can also be just, something that you are, you can wish to be something that you currently are not yet, right? Um, and so that means that um, most probably right now, you do not have the skills, right? You do not have the skills, you do not have the character traits, you do not have all the things that you need to be able to become who you want to be at the end of the year, right? So to say it more plainly, when I set a goal now, I'm setting a goal at the beginning of this year for the end of this year, right? What I deeply desire is to be something or to have something that I'm not or that I do not have right now. So that means that if you look at it in terms of like there's a recipe to achieve specific things, that means that I do not yet have the recipe to be or to have the thing, or the being that I want to be. And so that means most probably even if you worked really hard, perhaps you needed a new approach. Perhaps you needed, a mentor, a coach. Perhaps you needed a teacher. Perhaps you needed a course. Perhaps you needed more time. Perhaps you needed to revise your approaches. Perhaps you needed to read. I don't know what you needed, right? But perhaps you needed more things than what you were able to have, right? And so what that tells me is one, you being harsh on yourself. If that's the scenario you're in, Martine, then perhaps you are hard on yourself, right? Both in twice, like except for the fact that the whole year you were probably hard on yourself as well, but you were harsh from the get-go. Like the goals that you set were not feasible for you with the resources you had and the knowledge that you had at the time, right? And then by the end of the year, you criticize yourself for not having reached the goals that were impossible to reach in the first place. And I would imagine that in between all of that, you were also beating yourself up because you were constantly being afraid, and probably having a tension between I really want to be there, and so I need to do all of these different things, right? And at the same time, probably you were feeling tired or anxious or whatever it was that you were feeling and thinking, like how do I respect myself? How am I loving to myself, right? And then those goals would come in opposition with your own well-being, right? So it's very difficult to be able to do these things. So what I'm suspecting from your first sentence is that actually, if we were in a second scenario, you probably didn't fail anything. You know what I mean? It's just a question of, and probably it suits both of the scenarios that I said. Actually, the idea would be moving forward, right? And it's you have the best, like your actual intention for your question here and what you want out of this session with me is actually, I think, the best that you could have because what you're asking for is not a quick fix. You're asking for, and you're not really saying what's wrong with me. You're saying, I can't do this, right? There's a little bit of self-blame in it, but you're saying, how do I move forward? How do I set my goals better in the next year? And that would be my one recommendation from any of these scenarios, whatever the failure that you perceive is, whether it's because you haven't done anything or it's because you have done much and it wasn't enough, right? In both scenarios, it goes back to how do you set your goals, right? What's a goal for you? How do you set it? What's the intention behind it? Are you trying to become someone you're not? And, do not give yourself any grace for the fact that, there's a reason why you're where you are and not where you want to be. And so it will require a lot of effort. It will require a lot of help. It will require a lot of trial and error. It will require a lot of time. It will require a lot of things, right? So I think that's where we could start. And I would ask if we were in a coaching session, I would ask you, like, how do you feel about that? Ask yourself, Martine, or anyone who's listening to this. Like, with anything that you perceive as a failure for last year, are you being very like harsh with yourself? Are you being excessively self-critical? I'm I'm imagining that part of it will be a yes, right? And so what is true? What is true about you didn't do? Can you acknowledge all the things you did do and be proud of that? Even though it didn't give you the result you wanted when you set that first goal last year, can you acknowledge that and like, be proud of what you actually did? And then can you, instead of blaming yourself, perhaps there's some behavior, right, that is connected to you not reaching the goal and you want to address that too, right? But perhaps that, like the behavior, can be one of your goals, like becoming more consistent or persistent or becoming more reasonable. I don't know what it is for you, right? But perhaps these character traits could be a goal in itself. That, like, I set an intention that this year, like, I'm gonna aim to become more and more reasonable, and you could have a little list of like what that looks like for you, being reasonable and give examples so that you know what that is. And you'd be able then to progress in that direction for the rest of the year. That could be a beautiful goal, right? So afterwards you say, and another little clue for me, for a detective coach here. I start strong, I have the sun in my eyes, by the way, so you will half see me, but I'll just keep going so that I don't bring the light on and off. I look like a ray of sunshine right now. I'm gonna take this as a positive. So I start strong and then break promises to myself. Um, I start strong. Yeah. Okay. So what that tells me, you start strong and then you break promises to yourself. Could mean, again, different things, right? The I break promises to myself can go back to what we were saying that you set goals that are way too harsh, that are not sustainable over the long run. That is very, very possible, right? So we've already addressed that. So acknowledge that, like see if that's true for you. And if it is, acknowledge that and make sure that, how can I say, you accept that you as a person have a tendency to go overboard, that you have a tendency to be overly enthusiastic or optimistic or to be overly ambitious. And so listen to me till the end, right? Don't log off because I just said that. Um, what I'm saying is not that like you should revise your goals so that they seem achievable to someone else. I'm just going to invite you to acknowledge I have to do that for myself. I have a tendency to do that. And that drives me completely crazy. Because then if I do like follow the goals that I used to have, then I would never be able to achieve it, even if I were to work every single hour of every single day of the whole year, right? Because they were so big, which there's advantages to that because I was making a lot of progress, right, all the time. The disadvantage was there were many disadvantages actually. So the cost was one, I was always extremely tired. I was getting resentful of the things that I actually loved. I also never felt like any of the progress that I made was enough. So it seemed impressive on the outside, but for me, it was never enough, right? Because I was comparing it to something that was impossible for me to reach at that point. So what I would say there is that if the breaking promises to yourself comes from something like that, then how about asking yourself the question of, am I someone who is overly excited in the beginning, who is overly enthusiastic, who has a tendency to like promise myself and the world, like way too much compared to what I'm capable of, right? And if that is true, do I have the inner strength, and the inner, like the self-awareness to just be okay with that? That that's a beautiful thing. It's part of like my, my makeup, like how my inner makeup, how I'm made, at least right now in this phase of my life. And if that is the case, then how about when I make my goals, right, or I set my intentions for the year, that I do a cross check. I first go in my very enthusiastic way, and then how about I go back to them in a more peaceful state or in a more tired state, like in a different state of how I feel, so that I can cross check with all the versions of myself that these goals feel good. You were talking about feeling good, right? That these goals feel good to me in any state that I'm in, not just when I'm the fiery, super excited type of version of me. So I'm already answering to your question, right? To your last question. That's one thing that I would do. The other thing is, because you're saying you start strong. So my assumption here is that you are indeed an excited person. I'm too, right? So when you're an excited person, you love starting. You like less finishing things. So that what that would mean is probably you're a firecracker. You're a fire starter, right? So most probably, Martine, you adore starting new projects and dreaming them and beginning and like all the excitement of like, right? And so most probably, if I see your profile correctly, my assumptions are correct in all of that, then that would mean you have no problem. Like you have no problem seeing difficulties in the beginning and going forward and jumping and all these types of things. You're good with that part, right? The thing is, however, that the momentum that you have in the beginning, at some point, it's going to fade, right? The excitement that you feel in the beginning, it's inevitably at some point going to fade because one, you will have obstacles in front of you that will make you feel discouraged. You will feel like you're not progressing as fast as you thought you would. You will have real life situations. Your life, people around you get sick, have issues. There's other priorities in your life, whatever it is, you get busy. Like there's so many things that can happen and that do happen in life. that can make us break that momentum, the original excitement that can get us, gives us fuel depending on your nature and the moment in your life. It can be from a few hours to quite a few days, sometimes even months, right? But at some point, the excitement will go down. And so my assumption here from what you're saying is that on top of your excited nature and that perhaps you're setting goals that are a bit like too pushy for mm, for your own good, let's say, for the good of like for your well-being as a human being in general, not for the human being who's excited when you're in a state of excitement. I would say that on top of that, most probably you I'm not sure, but you could have an issue to do with consistency as well. That like you are someone who um, loves the fire and the energy and the excitement, right? And the momentum. And that when that leaves, then you do not receive that like rush of energy that you were receiving in the beginning, and you have a hard time following through. So again, not sure if this is correct, Martine. Do write to me afterwards if you want. You can write me an email um, um, about this. But yeah, if that is the case, then again, ask yourself honestly, is that the case? Like, am I good? I would ask you that type of question in a coaching session. I would ask, like, how do you feel? Are you someone who's consistent in general? Like, and do you feel like is that something that you can see in other areas of your life where you get, I don't know, perhaps in your romantic life, right? You're super excited in the beginning, you give it all, and then after a little bit, you're like, oh, this is just another relationship or whatever it is that you tell yourself. And then it goes down and the excitement goes down and you just want to, remove yourself from any situation that is not exciting all the time. And so there, by the way, a lot of us, my generation and the generations that are younger, I'm 34, by the way. We tend to have an issue with that because we were raised, and increasingly so, we are in environments that excite us all the time, including our beautiful phones, right? That have so many beautiful things about them. But one of the things is we also get all these rush, we get a rush of adrenaline every single time we look at our phones. We get excited about things. We're in a society where we constantly have new things that we can buy, like we have all these rushes of energy and excitement and so on and so forth. And it makes it harder for us to then be able to do what previous generations were doing all the time because that was their only way of living. Their only way of living was to build things over a long, long stretch of time. And to be super patient and to be doing a lot of hard work, right? I'm over generalizing and simplifying, but I think you can see where like the big patterns that I'm pointing out to here. And so perhaps here, one of the things would be, do you have an issue with that or not? Perhaps you don't. If you don't, then perfect, move on. Just take the other advice that I gave and you push back on this one. But if this is true, that you have an issue, like you always get excited and then you don't get so excited, then perhaps a character trait, like an intention for 2026 would be, I would love to become someone who's consistent or more consistent, or who can, continue to do tasks and even though in the moment it might not be exciting. Or I would love to be someone who, I'm inventing things, right? My intention is I would love to become someone who is capable of like rekindling that inner fire that I feel in the beginning of a project, that I'm responsible for rekindling that fire over and over and over again, right? So that I never feel like the momentum is going down. I am consciously, not just through the circumstances of my life and how I feel and how early it is in a project, right? Um, I become someone who is responsible for the rekindling of my own fire and my own flame and my own desire for things, right? And I commit and commit and commit over and over and over again, right? That could be a beautiful intention for this year, right? And you can then imagine that if you do that consistently for 365 days, between the person you are today, who is receiving this feedback, to who you will become at the end of the year, there's a radical difference. There's a radical difference in what you will be capable of doing, but also how you will approach things, how you will perceive things, right? Probably momentum can never go back down to the same level that it was going before because now you feel like you're in control of your own momentum, right? So that would be my recommendation for you in that specific thing. Um, and then you were saying, I'm tired of failing, um, which again, the failing thing. So what it seems to me here is if I were to flip this sentence, I'm tired of failing, I hear it and I love that you are voicing it, right? Because I can tell that you do not want to what I translated into is I do not want to repeat this pattern again. Like I do not want to go through another year and have the same type of experience, which I would say, even though it's painful for you right now, it's the best type of feeling you can have if you want to change something in your life. Because the most powerful way for us to change something in our lives is for us to feel a big pain, like a lot of pain on a specific topic, so much so that we don't want to continue it. We want to change something about it, right? So I would say good for you, even though it doesn't feel like it. Good for you, right? It's a good sign. What it's also a sign of is that if I flip it, what you're saying, I'm tired of failing. You're basically saying if I flip it, I really want to succeed. Like, I'm tired of failing because what I really want is I really want to succeed, is basically what you're saying, right? Um, and so I think if the goal is not just that I don't want to fail, because then you're like in a lack type of energy, right? And you will try to like compensate for all your lacks, and it creates a top type of anxious energy as you go into the new year. Um, I'm not just saying on a spiritual level, right? On an energetic level. I also mean like how your mindset is going. Also just in your mind, that like you being in a state of mind where you just wasted time and you were a failure in 2025, and that's the energy that you come into in 2026, would also make sense to what you were saying before, that you start really strong and then you break your own promises because it's an energy of compensation. You would be making radical choices for the new year, choices that perhaps you're not entirely ready to make. And perhaps, because they come from this energy of compensation, they're too much compared to what you can actually do. Um, and so, building on that, what I would say is one of the things that I learned in the Tony Robbins world, and that we do all of the time with any person who comes in the environment, is all of us human beings, especially when we're excited, right? And when you go to a Tony Robbins event, but in any type of thing, usually you are very excited overall, right? And so from that space, you will make big decisions, which is a good thing, right? But you will make things. mm, like you will be so ambitious and so excited that you might create things that are not sustainable for you over the long run. So perhaps you can run on an event, you go to a personal development seminar, it gives you a big rush, right? For some, it's just a few days. For some, it's a few weeks. But at some point, it doesn't last. At some point, it goes away. Like real life gets back to you, right? And so if we want to make sure that the goals, the beautiful goals and aspirations you've set during the seminar, that they will last for you, we need to make sure that like your goals are what we call ecological, that basically they're sustainable over the long run. It's what I was telling you in the very beginning, if you remember when I said, can you cross check with the other versions of yourself, not just the excited one, but the tired one, the peaceful one, all these different things. Because when you do that, you basically make sure that your decisions, that the goals that you set, the decisions that you make, they're sustainable over the long run. And so the best way to do that is to set easy goals. So they can be big goals, right? But big goals that are easy for you to achieve. And so what I mean by that is that what I just said earlier, for example, if what I set if what I want to do, right? I have, let's say, 5 big goals in my life, and I want to achieve them. But I realize that like the meta theme, the bigger thing that comes back is that I will never accomplish them, right? I'm taking the example from you, Martine, that you were saying. If I will never achieve any of my goals, regardless of the area of my life, if I cannot be consistent. And so if I flip it, that means that if I were to set a goal that from now on, I want to be someone, the type of person who is consistent and who really enjoys and feels pride at being a consistent person, if that is my intention for this year, or one of them, then I am guaranteeing that it doesn't matter which goal I focus on. I am guaranteeing that if I'm a consistent person, I will make radical progress in all of these five areas because I will be consistent. And that means if we make it easy and we create rules for ourselves, then perhaps I can say that every single week, or even easier, every single month, right? I will make one radical action, like an action that will completely change my results, like a big, big action. I will take one of those big actions in each of those five areas. So it's big, right? Because you will take perhaps 3, 4, 5 hours in one day or if it's at the span of a week, but you will really focus on that thing, right? And you will make massive progress in one go for that specific goal. Repeat that over 12 months. You will have spent, if we go with the example, I'm sorry, my voice is going away. If we go with the example of, you spend 5 hours in a month, right, on a specific project, then that means that if you do X12, right, you will have spent 60 hours in your year on that specific goal. It's a lot of time if you think about it. But when you begin, you will be like, okay, just 5 hours in this month. Like, this is not enough. But the difference is if you were to take a big thing and say every single day, I will spend an hour on this thing. And yes, you would be at the end of the year with like 365 hours spent, on that specific task. I agree with you there. But is it sustainable? When you go on vacation, what happens? When your child gets sick, what happens? When the workload at work is too much, what happens? When you're sad, when you're depressed, when you have a migraine, whatever the circumstances, what happens then? Whereas if you have a monthly goal of spending 5 hours in the month in that thing, or like booking in your calendar, that's even easier. Make it easy for yourself. The easier, the better. Big action, massive action, the easiest way possible. You block in your calendar one time where you spend 5 hours, or two Saturdays in the month where you spend 2 hours and a half working on that specific project. At the end of the year, you'll have spent 60 hours on that specific thing, right? And so if it's, for example, writing a book, if it's, for example, building a website, if it's, for example, whatever it is, having date nights with my husband, whatever it is, all these things, they will compound over time and you will have drastic results by taking simple actions that are sustainable or ecological, however you want to say them. So that would be my suggestion for you there. And so I think when your final thing was, how do I set in an intention or goal in a way that feels good? I think I've already replied to a lot of that, right? By making it easy and so on and so forth, asking yourself some questions, right? On like what is really true for you, like establishing all of that. I would say that I think your question, like I said in the beginning, is really, really good because you're focusing on what feels good, which I was not expecting, by the way, by how you wrote the rest of your text. But that's exactly the idea. I would go more for intentions that I would go for goals, in a sense that, you know, if you set an intention of who you want to be, I will talk more about that when I do my own episode right after this one. But I've come to notice that when I aim to become a specific type of person, there's behaviors that I cannot escape. I need to embody specific behaviors that are useful for me in every category of my life. So I find that setting intentions for who I want to be, or like how I want to behave most of the time, 80% of the time, right? Remember this Pareto rule that we apply to everything? We apply it to this here too. Don't be too harsh on yourself. You can't be like that 100% of the time, especially if you're learning a new character trait. But can you imagine by the end of the year, if you're trying like every single day, you're reading as your intention, like you read your goals or your intentions every single day. It takes you 2 to 5 minutes, right? Ideally morning and evening if you want to be hyper focused, but that's up to you. You read that every single day, and that means that as you continue throughout your day, this will be somewhere in your mind, close by, so that when you have an opportunity to behave in one way or in another way, you're increasing the likelihood that you will choose the one that matches the character traits that you so deeply desire, right? Um, and so I would say, if I were you, I would balance it out, see what's good for you, but I would choose more intentions that I would choose goals. Um, like And if I were to have a specific goal, because sometimes, you know, if I want to write a book, for example, I want to write a book by the end of this year, that would be a goal for me, right? So by the end of this year, I'm going to write, a book that has 13 chapters, for example, right? Which means I would love to write one chapter, more or less one chapter per month. It's a goal. It has a deadline, has a specific thing that I want to do, right? And it doesn't prevent me from having an intention for who I'm going to be with that, because I could write a book and be a pusher and be like, okay, I hate this process and it's the hardest thing that I've ever done and I never have time for it, but I'm going to push through this one specific energy. Or I can set an intention, and this is going to be the most creative, most beautiful experience of my whole life, where I fully discover myself. Like you can go on a rant, like a poetic or inspired rant on like who you will be as you do this process. And it will entirely change how the goal feels to you. It will feel good. And so I would say I would create a few goals, right? That means something to you. Check, like we were saying, check if like it's ecological. Do all the parts of you, not just the excited or like the super dynamic or the hyperactive. I'm very, I'm a little hyperactive if you can't tell. Um, so is it just these versions of me, the go, go, go types of energies that have set the goal, or have the other parts of me that are slower, that are more peaceful, that are calmer, that want some rest, that want some balance, are they okay with it? And if not, like test it. Like what would this version say? Like, if I were to bring out the peaceful version of me, what would she say? Perhaps she would be more flexible on the timeline. Perhaps she would say, once a month is enough, right? Like I don't need that, Or perhaps it's a confident part of you. What would she say? And probably my confident version of me would be like, I she if I tap into that part of me, I know what I'm capable of. And one of the things I'm capable of, perhaps you can relate to that, is I can work like in a very focused way for quite a few hours. So for me, the best way to do anything is to just set a few hours. I work on one specific thing, put some music that I love, make the process really enjoyable. And the amount of things that I will do in like 4 to 5 hours is incredible. It's way more, it's way, way more than if I had set in my calendar 15 times to do the same thing, right? Um, so find ways to make this enjoyable for yourself, right? And I would even say, and I'm going to end on this, that whether you're setting goals or intentions and you want them to feel good, I would really recommend that your process for setting goals, right? Your goal setting workshop with yourself, right? Make it enjoyable too, because the energy that you will have when you write those goals will impact what types of goals you will write, what the goals will be, but also how you will write them. Um, and so I would say make the process really enjoyable. Have your favorite drink, be super cozy, have beautiful things around you, have beautiful smells. If you're someone who loves to dress up, like do whatever you need to make this process super enjoyable. Have beautiful, I don't know, put on your TV something that shows, beautiful backgrounds, whatever it is. You put your vision boards, put whatever it is that you need. Go to a cafe, go to a museum, and write those in that beautiful energy where you feel really, really good. Because from that place, the goals that will come out are not just goals that will be, um, you know, big and will make a massive difference in your life, but they will also feel good, right? Because you're feeling good in the moment, right? And you're feeling all the good things at once, and it will translate into your goals as well, however woo-woo it may sound. So that's what I have to say to you, Martine. I hope this was helpful to you and to everyone else who listened or watched. Thank you again for being here with me. Do let me know if you have more questions on these topics. As you can tell, I love, 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 love anything to do with goal setting, intentions, and so on and so forth. It's how I live my whole life for the past perhaps 7 years, something like that, if not more. Um, and I'm constantly tweaking them and thinking about them and how to make them more and more impactful while um, they're more and more enjoyable over a sustainable period of time. So if you have any other questions about that or your own situation, please go in the Google form below in the description box and ask me any of your questions or describe to me any of your situations. I'm sending you all my best vibes for the rest of this year. I'm wishing you all the very best, like I said in the beginning, and thank you again for watching. Bye, my friend. Have a beautiful, beautiful day.